Hey, shalom, shalom.
Shalom.
Shalom Lakam, which is peace unto you all. Anachna Waha'i Barisha Allah, we the Hebrew Israelites coming to you week in and week out through the spirit and power of Yahweh Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, to preach to you so-called Negroes, Latinos, Native Americans, West Indians, Haitians, and Israelite foreigners. Nachamadam, Kaya, Hamalaka, Thashamayim, Kwara, repent ye for. The kingdom of heaven is at hand. First and foremost, before we get started, we want to give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Racha HaKodash, while double honors to the elders and apostles of Great Millstone that taught us his truth and rule well. And much respect to you, bros, out there pushing his truth with all righteousness and sincerity. Shalom, shalom.
Shalom.
So, just as the lesson is entitled, it says embracing the physical and spiritual stretch. And we can start with the definition for a stretch. Baba Kusha.
So this is the definition for stretch in the Merriam-Webster. It says to extend one's limbs, one's body, etc., in a reclining position. It says to reach out, extend, to extend in length, to fell with or as if with a blow, to cause the limbs of a person to be pulled, especially in torture, to draw up one's body from a cramped, stooping, or relaxed position. It says to pull taut, to enlarge or distend, especially by force, to extend or expand as if by physical force. Strain. Let me continue reading.
Kind number 9 and 10.
Okay. Number 9, it says to cause to reach or continue as from one point to another or across a space.
Right. Pretty much going into again that the physical stretch.
Verse 10, A, it says to amplify or enlarge beyond natural or proper limits.
Right, because during like a physical stretch, you your body might be comfortable in a certain alignment, or it might be comfortable in a certain positioning with the muscles and stuff like that. So to ultimately reap the benefits of stretching, one has to push past the limits that one is used to. So that's why it says to amplify or enlarge beyond natural or proper limits. Then it says to expand as by improvision to fulfill a larger function. And stretching. Let's get a quick precept real fast. This is Job chapter 11 and verse 6, and it says, "In that he would shew thee the secrets of wisdom, that they are double to that which is. Know therefore that the Most High exacteth of thee less than thy iniquity deserveth." So pretty much the point being that wisdom is double. All right, so stretching is beneficial both physical in the physical and then also in the spirit. So Baba Kushak, could you go back to? Did you have something?
Hola.
So it says to amplify or enlarge beyond natural or proper limits. So when you put that in reference to your body, which stretching is ultimately good for to put your body back into alignment to where it's good in balance. All right, so that pretty much it decreases stress. All right, and then also it decreases stress both in the mind and in the body as well. But then it says to expand as by improvision to fulfill a larger function, in which as part of the straight gate, because the different obstacles that we go through ultimately stretch our faith. It's a reflection as to our spirit, our mental, all right, and then also the capacity of our faith. So could you get 1 Timothy chapter 4 and verse 8, Baba Kushab?
This is 1 Timothy chapter 4 and verse 8. It says, "For bodily exercise profiteth little, but godliness is profitable unto all things, having promise of the life that now is, and of that which is to come."
So it says for bodily exercise profiteth little. So exercise, ultimately working out. All right, but if you actually go into the definition of exercise, a one of the sub facets of exercise will go into stretching as well. Pretty much because from stretching, you can increase your flexibility, your mobility, and then also your strength.
Do you want me to get the root word for that?
You can scroll down a little bit.
Okay.
It says, keep going. It says training Go up a little bit.
Oh, Salaki.
Right there it says training, i.e., figuratively, at aestheticism, exercise. So aestheticism goes into get that word for aestheticism. Or unless you can pull it up.
Yeah, right here. It says aestheticism is a way of life that avoids comfort and luxury.
Right. So
Uh,
it says a way of life that avoids comfort and luxury, which that ultimately goes into discipline. So and stretching our bodies both physically, and spiritually, that goes into discipline. We're disciplining our bodies in a certain facet. Which it does have. It has the physical benefits of stretching. Does have a little profit. Which we got in First Timothy the 4th chapter, in the 8th verse. But the spiritual side of stretching ultimately is what ultimately grows us in faith. So could we if you have none, could we go to I'm gonna get this.
mhm.
So it says it says spiritual stretch. It is good for us to be stretched in all aspects of life. When we stretch the capacity of a muscle, which the capacity goes into the output, or the amount of power or output that it can put out. So it says when we stretch the capacity of a muscle, it becomes stronger. When we stretch our bodies, we become more flexible. When we challenge ourselves mentally or stretch our minds, we grow in our knowledge, reasoning, and understanding. I'm gonna get this preset real fast. This is Bon Sirach, chapter 6, and we'll get verse 18. And it says, "My son, gather instruction from thy youth up, so shalt thou find wisdom till thine old age." In which spiritually stretching ourselves, by gaining more wisdom, knowledge, and understanding, ultimately grows us, and it essentially allows for us to be have a degree of humbleness or humility, excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
Because when we look at stretching, when you look at like physical stretching, you're it's like a way to restore alignment and balance. So it's ultimately being comfortable with the environment that you're putting your body through. So when we look at it spiritually, all right, ultimately, our faith has to be tested, all right, as pursuant to Bon Sirach, the 2nd chapter. So in being tested, that's being comfortable with the Lord's will.
Mm-hmm. One thing I wanted to add, because you do, a lot of training, and also like, um, pretty much you're into boxing and stuff. So like that kind of like ties into that too, because when you're in boxing, it's like, or when you're in any kind of sport, you got to be tested.
Right.
You have what they call it, the when you're trying to make a cut, for the football team or whatever, you
Mm-hmm.
pretty much got to go through the certain tests to be able to make the cut. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? But even like I mentioned boxing, you got to be put through certain tests. You got to go through, you got to put yourself to certain, challenging tasks, and to be able to grow and be able to be in, I guess, fighting shape. You
I
know.
got a precept for you.
Mm-hmm.
This is this is 1 Corinthians chapter 9 and verse 25, and it says, "And every man that striveth for mastery is temperate in all things. Now
Mm-hmm.
they do it to obtain a corruptible crown, but we an incorruptible."
Mm-hmm. Says, he that striveth for mastery is temperate in all things, meaning you're disciplined, you're locked in. You're putting away, everything that causes distractions, right? And you're pretty much, you know, putting hammer to nail, as they say. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I'm saying? So essentially, by applying these things, you're essentially going to grow, and it takes time. Just like when you work out and you're working out to grow muscles. You got to continuously put it through certain type of stress to be able to grow, and certain muscle groups got to be put through particular certain exercises to be able to tap into them, right? And the
Right.
same thing with the spirit. The spirit has to go through certain trials and tests, because some tests we haven't been put through. Some brothers haven't been put through certain other tests, so we got to be put through those tests to be able to work out those spiritual muscles.
Um, since we on this topic, I want to get, I want to get this.
Hmm.
This is, let me see. this is an excerpt right here. It says, if faith is never stretched or tested by life's tensions, it becomes spiritually stagnant, weak, and rigid. Just
Mm.
like an unused muscle, unstretched faith loses its capacity to endure hardship, handle greater responsibilities, or trust deeply during a crisis. All right, in
Mm.
which all of those are imperative, on the straight gate. Because if you don't ultimately test your strength, you for one, you're not going to have that confidence, which confidence goes back to with fidelity, with faith. You're not going to have
Mhm.
that belief. And then also it says I'm gonna read again. It says, if faith is never stretched or tested by life's tensions, which means we have to go through some things, through much tribulation, shall we enter into the kingdom of the Most High, roughly paraphrasing. It says, if faith is never stretched or tested by life's tensions, it becomes spiritually stagnant, weak, in which we understand, when something is stagnant, if you take like stagnant water, essentially it becomes, dirty, which to bid ourselves to the marriage, we want to put ourselves into a spiritually holy and clean estate, So
Oh,
it says
Salakia,
just
bro. Oh,
mhm.
Salakia. Now, I just wanted to add to that point that you mentioned us being stagnant because even physically, when you're physically stagnant, what happens? You start to develop uh, what they call it, atrophy in the muscles.
Yeah, we're right here.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
it says the risk of remaining unstretched. It says the risk of remaining unstretched, atrophy and weakness. Without the resistance of tension, faith stays small and flabby, unable to carry heavy burdens. In which, ultimately, we understand. The thing right now we're in a crucible, if you will. This is
Hmm.
the training ground. This is the initiation. All right,
Hmm.
well, a rite of passage, if you will. So which is preparing us for the actual test. Right now, we in that not the pop quiz. Yeah, this is the pop quiz. All right,
Hmm.
we in that pop quiz phase or the midterm, and we got that
Hmm.
final exam. All right,
Hmm.
from when all hell pretty much breaks loose. So right now we're like the brother Quanwaf goes into, we getting our spiritual gym reps in, you know.
Hmm.
So it says the risk of remaining unstretched, atrophy and weakness without the resistance of tension, faith stays small and flabby, unable to carry heavy burdens. It says
Hmm.
rigidity, in which we understand the scriptures say, it goes into, it says, if you're not able to carry the burden, roughly paraphrasing, basically we have to be able to carry the burdens, and how we're
Hmm.
able to, oh, excuse me, we have to carry our cross,
Carry
so
across, right?
yeah, yeah, how we're able to carry our cross, ultimately, is through the different tests that the Lord puts us through, through being spiritually stretched. So it says,
Hmm.
rigidity, instead of bending under pressure, unstretched faith snaps or breaks when unexpected trials finally arrive. So if you look at the body, all right, if you was to, like if you had a runner, all right, and, running, sprinting or whatever, all right, and then he pop a hamstring, that's because
Hmm.
he isn't stretching the hamstring, so same thing spiritually, we have to be put through that crucible, and we have to ultimately subscribe to the tenets that's in the scriptures. You know,
Hmm.
um, could you get
I guess
Deuteronomy chapter? You go ahead.
also like I just wanted to get that for you if you wanted it. That Matthew 10:38.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
You.
it says Matthew 10:38, and he that taketh not his cross and followeth after me is not worthy of me. Right. So just like you said, you pretty much got to carry your burden, but that comes with you being able to withstand the mental pressure, right? The spiritual pressure, physical pressure, because all that's going to come upon you, pursuant to, was it Sirach, the second chapter, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where it says, as a matter of fact, let me pull it up. Sirach 2 and 1.
Could you read down to 5?
Yeah, Khan. Sirach 2 and 1, it says, my son, if thou come to serve the Lord, prepare thy soul for temptation. You want to speak on that?
God says, "My son, if thou come to serve the Lord, prepare thy soul for temptation." So scriptures say, in Bonsarab, the 6th chapter and the 7th verse, that a friend has to be proven.
Mm,
So it's not like we have to. It's not like we're not going to go through anything to ultimately be The elect ultimately is already predestined. All right, but the elect is predestined, and it's written that the elect ultimately is going to be tested. So it says, "My son, if thou come to serve the Lord, prepare thy soul for temptation." So the elect have to ultimately be tested. All right, and in that testing, all right, that's the straight gate, and that's also synonymous with being spiritually and having the faith stretched. All right, having you still got that definition pulled up.
For stretch,
Mhm.
yeah.
It says to amplify or enlarge beyond natural or proper limits. So it's not like we can just waltz into the kingdom or walk into the kingdom as we are. No, we have to ultimately go glory to glory. We got to elevate. We have to ultimately be comfortable with all right that straight gate. That's why the title
Mm-hmm.
it says embrace the physical and spiritual stretch.
Mm-hmm.
We have to embrace it. We have to ultimately fall in love with the process.
Mm.
Don't rush the process. But ultimately abide in the process.
Right, right. So it says, verse 2, Sirach 2 and 2, set thy heart aright and constantly endure, and make not haste in time of trouble.
Right. I got a preset real fast. This is
Mm-hmm.
Deuteronomy. What's a lot? Let me get this too. It says now going back up. It says the same is true spiritually. Because again, stretching has the physical benefits. All right, but it mirrors the spiritual. So it says the same is true spiritually. When our faith is stretched, it grows and becomes stronger. Being stretched is a really good thing. The only problem is that stretching can be hard. It says this is true physically, mentally, and spiritually. So it says, verse 2, set thy heart aright and constantly endure and make not haste in the time of trouble. So how is this done? Let's get Deuteronomy chapter 4, and we'll get verse 4. And it says, but ye that did cleave unto the Lord your power are alive, every one of you, this day. Behold, I have taught you statutes and judgments, even as the Lord my power commanded me, that ye should do so in the land whither ye go to possess it. Keep therefore and do them, for this is your wisdom and your understanding in the sight of the nations, which shall hear all these statutes and say, surely this great nation is a wise and understanding people. So I want to get this word for to cleave. So, and it says dabak, and it says clinging, adhering to. So ultimately, when we're being spiritually tested, we have to adhere to the precepts. That's how we let's say set thy heart aright and constantly endure and make not haste in time of trouble. I believe that was verse 2, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's ultimately how because in physical stretching, you got those moments where you're like, damn, this shit, this shit low key hurt, but
Mm-hmm.
you ultimately you abide in it. You see because the benefits that you get, so we have to stay focused. That's why the scriptures say, to keep thy eye single, which a single eye is focusing and it's also healthy, but we
Mm-hmm.
ultimately, driving home the point, we ultimately set our heart aright by cleaving unto the Lord, by subscribing to these scriptures.
That's right. That's right. Let me go back. Sirach 2 and verse 3, it says, cleave unto him and depart not away, that thou mayest be increased at thy last end.
Right. So that's why it's imperative, to look at that light at the end of the tunnel. We got to
Mm-hmm.
follow the Lord Yahweh Shai, who is the true trailblazer.
Mm. Con. It says, verse 4, whatsoever is brought upon thee, take cheerfully, and be patient when thou art changed to a low estate.
Right. In which we got Job 11 and 6. It said that wisdom is double, so the small example that we have in stretching in the physical, that's what mirrors the spirit. So that's why it
Mm-hmm.
says, whatsoever is brought upon thee, take cheerfully and be patient when thou art changed to a lower state. So we got to be comfortable with that straight gate. We got to be comfortable with the obstacles. They got a saying like in the military, like different like uh, spec ops groups, they say embrace the suck, which this isn't the same, but on the same sentiment, we have to
Mm-hmm.
again, we got to embrace what we're going through. You see, because that's just what we signed up for. Just like it,
Right.
like a boxer or like a fighter, if they get like a black eye or something like that, it is what it is. So
Mm-hmm.
you take it on the chin and you keep going.
Right. Right. It's pretty much part of the routine. It's part of the I don't even know the word. I guess the protocol.
Hmm.
It's like that dose of medicine that that it might be bitter, but is needful.
Right.
But going down to verse 5, it says, "For gold is tried in the fire, and acceptable men in the furnace of adversity."
Hmm. So it says, for gold is tried in the fire, and acceptable men in the furnace of adversity. So I got this right here because that's a crucible. So it
Mhm.
says, a crucible is a heat resistant container used to melt metals. It also means a very hard test or a place where big changes happen. So it shouldn't be, because the those that ultimately go in it, they're not able to withstand the pressure. They ultimately wasn't part of the elect, anyway. But the elect ultimately is going to go through the hard test, all right, and it's gonna be a change for the better. It's gonna be
Right.
a significant change.
Mm. This has me thinking of the Sirach 4 and 16. Let me see. Uh, yeah, Sirach 4 and 16. It says, "If a man commit himself unto her," talking about wisdom, "he shall inherit her, and his generation shall hold her in possession. For at the first she shall walk with him by crooked ways, and bring fear and dread upon him, and torment him with her discipline, until she may trust his soul and try him by her laws." And just like you mentioned, pretty much we're gonna have to go through, that straight gate. We're gonna have to go through, certain trials and tests to make sure we're made worthy. We just read, was it Sirach 2 and 5, right? Acceptable men in the furnace of adversity. So we're gonna have to go through adversity. We're gonna have to go through, them crooked ways. You know what I'm saying? To ultimately find out, what we're made of. And
Right.
eventually, like you said, going back to the title of this video, pretty much stretch us into the figure of the Lord.
Because it's a saying, like in like weather or meteorology, like, or just it might just be like just a regular saying, but the trees like in a storm that ultimately, the ones that don't last is the ones that are rigid. All right, but the
Mm,
ones that ultimately survive the storm is the ones that kind of sway with the wind, because they got the roots down on the ground, and ultimately they're flexible. They
mm,
ultimately are able to withstand the storm. You know, and what
mhm.
you know
Hey,
that. Mhm.
oh, Salakia. Now I was gonna say, pretty much, usually the ones that are very brittle are the ones that ain't getting no nutrients to them, ain't getting that
Right.
water, ain't getting none of that in them. You
Hmm.
know, so pretty much, um, if you stay rooted, you know, like just adding to your point, if you stay rooted, you're gonna receive those nutrients to be able to flex, be able to move. You know what I'm saying? But that comes with tapping into into this word.
Kind of. I got a precept real fast. It's Psalms chapter 1 and verse 1, and it says, "Blessed is the man that walketh not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor standeth in the way of sinners, nor sitteth in the seat of the scornful. But his light is in the, excuse me. But his delight is in the law of the Lord, and in his law doeth he meditate day and night. And he shall be like a tree planted by the rivers of water, that bringeth forth his fruit in his season. His leaf also shall not wither, and whatsoever he doeth shall prosper." So men in the scriptures are likened unto trees, in which the trees again that survive is the ones that's flexible, in which in the spirit, that's ultimately us following the spirit, and then also being plugged into the source, plugged into the true living water, the scriptures, like you said, with the tenets and the principles of the scriptures. We have to tap into the source.
Right, right. Because that's where we receive our energy. The scriptures talk about how though our outward man perish, yeah, our inward man is renewed day by day. But that comes by pretty much staying rooted.
Right.
That's how you be able to receive of those um, of that refreshing, of that renewal. You know, because we're constantly growing. And even though we're taking a beating out here and physically, through Esau, we're still growing. You can't stop that spiritual process. But you got something you want me to get? I have something real quick.
You good?
Con. Just adding to that. This is James 1. I don't know if you had this on deck. I don't want to I jumped the gun.
Oh, you got it.
This is James 1 and verse, I'll just start at 2. It says, My brethren, count it all joy when you fall into diverse temptations, knowing this, that the trying of your faith worketh patience, but let patience have her perfect work, that ye may be perfect and entire, wanting nothing. Right. So the trying of your patience, you know, is like when you're going through different temptations, you're going through different tests, but you continue to abide in the scriptures and apply the scriptures, and pretty much show your faith through these temptations. That's going to increase your endurance. It's going to increase your patience. But let me get this in the NLT real quick, because kind of goes into it a little bit. So this is James 1 and 2 in the NLT. It says, Dear brothers and sisters, when troubles of any kind come your way, consider it an opportunity for great joy. For you know that when your faith is tested, your endurance has a chance to grow. Just like you have, brothers like to go in and work out. You feel good when you're about to go in and work out. You like, oh shit, I'm about to go in. Get this in, get this sweat in, get this pump in, right? Well, that same sentiment, you gotta feel like that whenever tests and troubles come your way. You gotta be use it as a chance to grow, as it says right here. It says, so let it grow, for when your endurance is fully developed, you will be perfect and complete, needing nothing, right? Because ultimately what the Lord is doing, he's preparing us for that ultimate test, as you mentioned earlier, right? The hour of temptation, Jacob's trouble, all these are tests that's gonna, truly test, where your faith lies, where your loyalties lie, right?
Right. That tension really, it's a like you said, pretty much liking it unto boxing. That's keeping you sharp. So the different that pain. All right, that's another opportunity to be sharp. To see how sharp you are. So pretty much the obstacles is a reflection as to if you're ultimately abiding in the spirit. Because the scriptures say if thou faint in a day of adversity, thy strength is small. So we have to ensure that we subscribe to the scriptures. All right, and when those tests do come, we ultimately pass it through the spirit.
Right. Pass it with flying colors, as they say. And you'll realize that once you pass a certain test, that test might come back again. Well, you already know what to do at that point. Your wisdom has leveled up. Like you mentioned earlier, we're going from glory to glory. So now tests that you faced before, you face them again. Now they're easier tests. It's something like when you go to school, they give you this exam from 4th grade. Well, now you're in 6th grade. You take that test. You're like, this is easy.
Right.
Now you got other things to be proven with.
I got something for
you.
It says what the tension accomplishes. It says expands capacity. Pressure creates the inner room needed to hold new blessings, wisdom, and responsibilities. It says it builds endurance. Moving through discomfort trains you to trust more easily the next time difficulty arises. It says it deepens reliance. Tension shifts your focus from your own limited strength to a higher power. So in which the scriptures say, cursed be the man that trusted in man. So you had something else, bro? Cause I put this in the AI overview, but it says yes, tight muscles and mental stress form a two-way loop. It says mental stress causes muscles to tighten via the nervous system, and physical tightness sends constant stress signals back to the brain. Stretching breaks this cycle by signaling physical and mental safety. So going back to 1 Timothy 4:8, we it has we have to be flexible. We have to show our spiritual flexibility, all right, and being comfortable with the will of the Lord, all right. Then also actual stretching can have effects, small benefits in the spirit too, Could we get Matthew chapter 7 and verse 13 and 14, and then I got also Psalms 46 and 10.
This is Matthew 7 and verse 13. It says, enter ye in at the straight gate, for wide is the gate and broad is the way that leadeth to destruction, and many there be which go in thereat.
So, it says, enter ye into the straight gate, for wide is the gate and broad is the way that leadeth to destruction. So it's a lot of people that's ultimately going to take that broad way, and it's going to lead to ultimate destruction. It says, and many there be which go in thereat. So a lot of people are ultimately going to take that path. Whereas the elect ultimately is going to take the road less traveled by. Verse 14, it says, because straight is the gate and narrow is the way which leadeth unto life, and few there be that find it. So ultimately the elect is selecting, all right, that road less traveled by, that road of temptation, that road to be proven. And in choosing this, all right, it's not going to be the stiff, rigid ones. It's going to be those that are ultimately flexible and those that are ultimately abiding in the source, which is these scriptures.
That's right. Because ultimately, what was going on is that the elect are being called to a higher calling,
Right.
And to reach that higher calling, you're gonna have to go through this, like they mentioned here in Matthew 7. You're gonna have to go through that straight gate. There is no other way. The scriptures talk about you cannot come up some other way, right? You're gonna
Right.
have to go through that straight gate in order to receive those gains. When you're working out, there is no shortcut, to fitness, right? You're gonna have to eat those bitter herbs. You're gonna have to go through do those supersets. You're gonna have to, go through rigorous training and in a rigorous process that requires discipline. And there might be moments where you'd be like, "Damn, bro, I need a cheat day, or I need some rest or whatever." Well, being part of this walk, you can't just step aside and be like, I'm just gonna take a 10-minute break, what I'm saying,
Right.
or like in reality, it'd be like, what I'm saying, like take a hiatus and then come back and see if I can do it again. No, you can't do that.
Right. Right. It ain't no, you can't, what I'm saying, like cut the crust off. You can't
Right.
try to take the easy way out. It ain't gonna be no gimmicks. All right. It's just like in that movie, Infinity War, or I think it was Infinity War. But Doctor Strange, he was like, it's only one way,
Yeah.
it's
Yep.
only one way, and it's always gonna hurt, so it's the straight gate,
That's
but
right.
could we get Psalms 46
Con.
and
Hey,
verse
and what
10?
they say in the world, let's say what they say, pain is just weakness leaving the body.
Right.
So you're gonna have to go through that process, man, to get rid of that weakness.
Hmm. But then
But you said,
on the
oh,
other
Salaki, go
side,
ahead, Salaki.
I always feel, because you be like, damn, like, like a physical example, you like, damn, I don't feel like going to the gym.
Hmm.
You know, that's the initial thought. Sometimes, you don't feel like
Hmm.
going to the gym, but when you go to the gym, it's like, damn, I feel good.
Right. Yeah, you feel
So,
better.
right.
But you said you
Oh,
want Psalms
46 and 10.
46 and 10. Con. This is Psalms chapter 46 and verse 10. It says, "Be still and know that I am the Most High. I will be exalted among the heathen. I will be exalted in the earth."
Right. So it says, be still and know that I am the most high, So the Lord is in complete control, because sometimes, or at times, um, we ultimately can, uh, at times we in this flesh, we can abide, and what we feel like should happen. You see, but
Right.
that's where the physical and the spiritual flexibility comes forth. We got to ultimately trust. All right, we got to trust in the Lord Yahweh Bahasham Yahweh Shai, and that's why the scripture right here. And you mentioned a point, bro. You said pretty much uh, in so many words. You're going through
Hmm.
different stuff, and then you like, damn, I need rest. All right, that's
Hmm.
why the scripture say, come to me all that are heavy laden, and I shall give thee rest.
Hmm.
So where we ultimately go for succor and aid is the Lord Yahweh Shai, who comes in, the volume of the book. I want to
Hmm.
get this word for still, and it says rapa. Excuse me. It says rapa, and it says to sink, relax, to let drop, be disheartened. It says to withdraw. It says to relax. All right. So physically stretching, and then also spiritually stretching. Like we shouldn't be in a, there isn't a such thing as free will. We're all abiding by the Lord's will.
Hmm.
So we ultimately got to trust in the Lord.
Right. Right. One thing you mentioned, too, is when it comes to you catching all this hell or whatever, but first of all, we read Sirach 2. So we coming into this thing, the scriptures talk about count the cost. So coming into this thing, we understood what we would go through when we came into this thing. So it's not like we should be surprised when we're going through certain things,
Mhm.
but even when we're going through certain things, certain tribulations, certain troubles, certain things that that is bitter, that that puts you in a position of difficulty. Pretty much you shouldn't you pretty much shouldn't rush to try to get out of that situation instantly. That's why
Right.
when we read in Sirach 2, it says make not haste in the time of trouble, meaning don't rely on you know a fast solution, because ultimately what the Lord's trying to do is well, first of all, you got to understand that it's all the will of the Lord at the same time. But another thing is you got to understand that this is all part of the process, to make you
Right.
grow, to make you, because um like you mentioned earlier, you got to trust the process. you know
Right.
you got to be able to trust that, trust in the Lord, that whatever is being presented in front of you is an opportunity to elevate. you know that's the reason why. Another thing is, you gotta what's that scripture where it says, examine yourselves whether you be in the truth, right?
Uh, 1 Corinthians 13:5 or Second
Yeah,
Corinthians
First
13 and
Corinthians.
5.
Yeah, I think it's Second Corinthians, or it could be First Corinthians, as a matter of fact, let me get it. Let me just get it.
I got it right here.
Okay, Bible Shot, can you read it?
Kind of 2 Corinthians 13 and verse 5. It says, examine yourselves whether ye be in the faith. Prove your own
Mhm.
selves. Know ye not your own selves, how that Yahweh Shai Hamashayach is in you, except ye be reprobates.
Right. So you gotta, continually analyze yourself. But one thing also is continually keeping your mind the end goal. What's your end goal? Whenever you go to the gym and work out, in your mind, you're like, oh man, I gotta hit this, I gotta hit that, I gotta hit this. You know, when in your mind, the same thing with the spirit. You should know your own self. You should know what you gotta be working on. You should know, what parts of the spirit and parts of what you need to fortify. The scriptures go into, putting on the whole armor, right? If you have a chink in one part in your arm, or a chink in the leg, or a chink in the back, you got to cover that up. Otherwise, when you go to war, that's an open. Uh, how should I put it? Like Achilles' heel. You know what I'm saying?
Right, because before you go to combat, it might be to where like, and that's why sparring is good, which that represents the physical and the spiritual stretch, and the spiritual sense,
Hmm.
because it's like, all right, you getting your ass whooped, but then it's like, all right, well, you got caught here, you got caught here, you got caught here, so then you understand, all right, well, this is what I need to do moving forward. So then when it
Hmm.
comes fight night, and you sharp, and then after you get that win, you like, shit, didn't want that bad.
Hmm. Sometimes all it takes is a little adjusting. The
Right.
scriptures go into how the Most High speaketh once, yet twice, yet man perceiveth not.
Hmm.
But sometimes the Most High speaks to you, telling you to make a certain adjustment here, a certain adjustment there, you know, and that comes through them trials and tribulations, man. The Most High
Right.
is speaking through us like that. You got it, bro.
Con, did you had anything else?
Uh, La.
Con, that was pretty much all I had. But
Okay, Con. Oh wait, Slakia. Mind if I get this real quick?
here you go.
This is Second Peter 1:10. It says, Wherefore the rather, brethren, give diligence to make your calling and election sure. If ye do these things, ye shall never fall. And just adding to the sentiment, to what we're talking about, if you're stretching, you gotta be diligent. You can't just do it one day and expect, that release, or that what I'm saying, that stretch to continue to give you benefit throughout, the week. You gotta do it in the daily. It's a daily thing. You gotta continue to stretch, to continue to loosen up, continue to expand. You know what I'm saying? And the same thing with this truth. right? You gotta give diligence to this to be able to see actual benefits. Like someone like you, we were sending each other or well, you were sending me, certain videos of stretching,
Hmm.
and pretty much some of the videos they were going into, they were like, you gotta do this in a like daily. You gotta pretty much,
Hmm.
like someone that's like stiff on their hip, they gotta do it daily. You know what I'm
Hmm.
saying? They can't just do it one day and then think that that's good enough. No, you gotta do it a daily thing. It takes time. It's a process, to
Right.
be able to unlock your hip. Someone that's stiff that hasn't moved in years is gonna take time. And the same thing with this truth. We're coming out of a dry state, out of a dead state. So it's gonna take time to go back to our former selves, how we used to be when we were um in Israel, you know but
Con.
and really to put us in that position to where we could be made acceptable in the eyes of the Lord, you know but yeah, that was pretty much it.
Con. Wait, I don't want to zaza banai pa. Lord's will, that was a beautiful edification with the spirit. Well, I don't want to zaza. I thought me actually like to wab. Lord's will, you'll have a good night. Well, we can go ahead and close it out by saying, call light and law. Yahweh Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham Chak, or Dashwa, double honest too. The elders and apostles of Great Millstone that told us his truth and rule well. Much respect to you, bros, out there pushing his truth with our righteousness and sincerity. Shalom, shalom.
Shalom.